students, my name is Niyati Said and thanks for watching Edupedia word videos. My topic for the presentation is the 8th section of the chapter Excretion and Osmoregulation, or excretory products and their elimination, of class 11th standard. Okay, in this we'll be studying about the micturition. Okay, micturition is the expulsion of urine from the urinary bladder. Okay, that process is known as micturition. It is a reflex process, but in grown-up children and adults it can be controlled voluntarily to some extent. Okay, remember, to some extent it can be controlled voluntarily. Okay, so before going through the steps of the micturition, I would like to tell you that nerve supply to the urinary bladder and sphincters. The urinary bladder, this is bladder, urinary bladder. So the urinary bladder and the internal sphincter, they are supplied by both sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system of autonomic nervous system, whereas the external sphincter, it is supplied by somatic nerve. Okay, see, these are two sphincters, internal and external sphincter. So the internal sphincter, it is supplied by both sympathetic as well as parasympathetic ganglions. Okay, or you can say sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system of autonomic nervous system, whereas external sphincter, see, sphincters are like you can say gates. Okay, so the external sphincter is supplied by somatic nerve. Okay, this is somatic nerve that stimulate relaxation of internal urethral sphincter muscle. Okay, now what is the function of sympathetic nerve here? The stimulation of nerve, it causes relaxation of detrusor muscle of the urinary bladder and constriction of the internal sphincter. This is internal sphincter. Okay, so it causes filling of the urinary bladder, and sympathetic nerve is called as nerve of filling. Okay, nerve of filling, that means it helps in the filling of the urine in the urinary bladder. Okay, and it causes constriction of the internal sphincter so that urine can be filled easily in the bladder. Okay, now what is the function of the parasympathetic nervous system? That it helps in the stimulation of this nerve. It causes contraction of the detrusor muscle and relaxation of this internal sphincter. Okay, and thus it leads into the emptying of the bladder. So the parasympathetic nerve is called as nerve of emptying or the nerve of micturition. So the question may come, what is nerve of micturition? So that is parasympathetic ganglion, or you can say parasympathetic nervous system, because it helps in the relaxation of the you can say relaxation of the internal sphincter, and thus it helps in emptying of the urinary bladder. Okay, now comes the function of somatic nerve. Somatic nerve, students, it's like it maintains a tonic contraction of the skeletal muscle fiber that forms external sphincter. Okay, that forms as I have told you, this external sphincter, it is supplied by somatic nerves. This is somatic nerve. Okay, so the somatic nerve, it maintains the tonic contraction of the skeletal muscle fibers that forms the external sphincter, so that the external sphincter is constricted always. During micturition, micturition means expulsion of urine from the urinary bladder. So during micturition, the nerve is inhibited. Thus, the somatic nerve is responsible for the voluntary control of the micturition. Okay, that this somatic nerve, it helps in the voluntary control of the external sphincter. Okay, so the urine flows out from the urinary bladder through the urethra. Okay, now coming to the steps involved in the micturition. See, gradual filling of urinary bladder takes place. Urine always collects in drops, okay, drop by drop. Then stretching of the urinary bladder takes place, and then stretch receptors on its wall send impulse to the CNS, that is central nervous system, and it passes on motor messages, and contraction of smooth muscles of the bladder and simultaneous relaxation of the urethral sphincter is called as micturition. That is expulsion of urine from the urinary bladder. That is called as micturition. It is a reflex process, but in grown-up children and adults it can be controlled voluntarily to some extent. Okay. Now the neural mechanism that causes micturition is called as micturition reflex. An adult human excretes around 1.5 liters of urine in a day. That is around 25 to 30 gram of urea per day. Urine, what is urine? Urine is a light yellow colored watery fluid and slightly acidic in nature because its pH is about 6.0. Okay, and the volume of the urine depends upon the fluid intake, level of physical activity, temperature, and extent of sweating, and it is yellow in color due to the pigments such as urobilin and urochrome, which is produced by bile pigments. And what's the nature of urine? Urine is acidic with pH ranging from 4.8 to 7.5, and it except after meals, because after meals it is due to alkaline tide, its pH varies. Okay, and urine is hypertonic in nature. That means note that though glomerular filtrate is alkaline, but the urine is acidic in nature. Okay. Now the factors that influence urine formation is first is diet, second is weather, and third is psychological state of the body, psychological as well as physiological state of body. Psychological states such as nervousness, excitement, and when you are scared. So all these things, they influence urine formation. Okay, and students' urine has a characteristic odor also, and this typically contains uric acid, bicarbonate ion, creatinine, potassium ions, sodium ions, chloride ions, and urea. Okay, an average urine volume per day for an adult is about, I have told you, 1.5 liters. Okay. Now the various conditions it affect the characteristic of urine. Urine analysis, it helps in the clinical diagnosis of many metabolic disorders and malfunctioning of the kidney. For example, glycosuria. Glycosuria means presence of glucose in urine, and that's the name of it. Glyco means glucose and urea means urine. Okay, so the glucose, when it is present in urine, then that condition is known as glycosuria. And the ketonuria, when the ketone bodies are present in urine, so that indicates diabetes mellitus. Okay, so these are the conditions that affect the characteristic of urine, but the urine analysis, it helps in the clinical diagnosis of many metabolic disorders and malfunctioning of the kidney. Okay, so this comes to an end. Thank you, and keep watching Edupedia Word videos.